Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday. We are looking ahead to week 14 of the regular season. This for pretty much everybody's league should be the last week of the regular season. Big, crucial week. Only two teams on a bye, the Cardinals and the Commanders. So you have a good complement of players to choose from, although given the state of quarterbacks this year, not as good a complement of players as you might have hoped. Which is why last night in a couple of Superflex leagues, I actually had to start Bailey Zappi. And you know what, Dennis? I was not sad about that as we were sitting in the midway through the second quarter, and he had already gunslung 3 touchdown passes in the Patriots' 21-18 victory over the Steelers.
If I could reach through there and smack you, I would, because I have a league where I literally started Devin Singletary in my Superflex and left Zappi on my bench. That's how little I believed in him.
I was feeling so, but you know what? There was a couple of leagues where I thought about putting Zeke in, and I was like, nah. And as soon as I started watching, I was like, oh, damn it. This is going to be like his best game of the season.
Yeah, Zeke looked, inefficient running, but that's what we expect at this stage of his career. But Zappi targeted him. Zappi, you have on the sheet, your question is Zappi the answer? And my question in response is, what is the question?
Well, I mean, I feel like the Patriots are going to do some kind of a house cleaning this offseason, but at least after his first start, I don't know if I thought Zappi was even going to start the rest of the season, but after seeing what he did last night, I bet he finishes the season.
I mean, you've got to let him at least go until he reverts back to form. So last night, his yards per attempt were 8.57, and that would be third highest of all quarterbacks with 100 dropbacks. However,
Juju Smith-Schuster looks like Pittsburgh Juju.
In his previous games, actually his YPA is 5.86, which is substantially worse. But if he could play like he did last night, he had a 67% completion rate, checked it down when he was supposed to, didn't turn the ball over. I mean, there's some there. There's some there. You don't need to have the strongest arm. I think we've seen that in the past, but you've got to make the right decisions, and the team has to put you in the right situations. Now, I don't think he's going to go far with the receiving corps that the Patriots have, but he made Hunter Henry look great.
If Juju can go back to looking – last night was what I thought we would potentially see from Juju all season. He was – pretty decent for the Patriots last year, and he looked more like Pittsburgh Juju Smith-Schuster, and Ramondre they said could miss a couple of games. So I actually thought Zeke didn't look too bad. They haven't been running very efficiently even with Ramondre in there most of the time, but if he's going to get up those dump offs, Hunter Henry looked a lot like week 1 Hunter Henry. Zappi seemed to have some chemistry with Bill O'Brien and what they were doing. So if the Patriots had played like that their previous 12 games, I don't know if as many people would wonder if Bill Belichick was going to be gone.
Right.
Meanwhile, speaking of coaches potentially on the hot seat, Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season, but this team was 7-4 a couple weeks ago and have dropped 2 straight home games to teams that came in 2-10. That is an ominous sign. The Steelers still technically, I think, have the edge for the wild card at the moment, but it's a pretty crowded AFC field. Actually, I think that dropped them out because Texans would have gone in. So should Tomlin be on the hot seat? He seems to be getting called out quite a bit.
So it's easy to get frustrated when you win a lot. We're seeing it in New England, a couple years without Brady, and now Belichick is, oh, he was a sham. He's the worst coach ever. Brady propped him up. But the facts are that the Steelers still have a winning record and a shot at the playoffs. It seems like they missed on their quarterback. I expected more from Mitch. He disappointed. Did I expect, 400 yards and 4 touchdowns? No, but I did not expect, what was it? 2 interceptions or 3 interceptions
from Trubisky. I think he only had 1.
No, I thought he had 2. Maybe I'm wrong. He didn't play great. He got a rushing touchdown, had the 2-point conversion to Freiermuth, the touchdown to Johnson. It feels like it would be change for the sake of change if they moved on from Tomlin. That happens sometimes, but I think if they move on from Mike Tomlin, several teams will be knocking at his door. Like if they can Tomlin on Black Monday, I would expect additional coaches to get fired because they want a shot at Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, Mitch only threw 1 interception. They couldn't run the ball very well. 12 for 29 for Harris, which made me feel great on a few of my fantasy teams. 7 for 11 for Jaylen Warren. So that certainly did not help. Now on to the rest of Week 14, and we start with a huge matchup in the NFC South. The 5-7 Buccaneers at the 6-6 Atlanta Falcons. Dennis, since it is such a crucial week, probably just going to focus on some of the more bigger lineup questions. So for the Buccaneers, you're starting Mike Evans, you're starting Rachaad White. Those guys have been doing pretty well. Any other Buccaneer you're trusting?
Trust is a tenuous word in this situation. There are a lot of win and you're in scenarios for people. Baker is quarterback 11 over the last 7 weeks. Atlanta gives up the 11th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So he's right on the verge of being a streamer, and he's a start in super flex leagues. Chris Godwin has had a rough year. I think he's wide receiver 44 or something. Baker just hasn't been able to support 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers. And part of that might be Rachaad White being as fantasy relevant as he is. He's what, RB5, I think, or something.
He started running better, but you're right. He's getting a lot of receptions.
So it just, for me, if you have Godwin, you probably have to start him at least as a flex. But you're not feeling great about it. Your hope is that, well, it's Atlanta. Let's hope, they don't play well.
You're right. White is RB5. I think if there was a deep option that I was taking a shot on with the Buccaneers, it might depend on my tight end situation, but Cade Otton, it's not incredible, but you could do worse.
He had a good game this year.
He's had a couple of decent. He doesn't have the ceiling of some other candidates, but I've noticed he seems to have a little bit more stable floor. Speaking of fantasy, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts are huge potential fantasy assets. How are you feeling about them in this crucial Week 14?
So, Bijan is sitting at RB 13. London is wide receiver 44. That seems like a travesty, even with Desmond Ridder. And Pitts is tight end 15. That all seems like just not great. I think Tampa gives up the 10th fewest fantasy points to running backs. So we've got Bijan in a timeshare with at any given moment. We've seen a couple games where Arthur Smith gives him volume, but then he seems to turn the next game and give Algier 12 or 14 carries and Cordero Patterson 8 carries, and it's like he forgot. They give up the fewest fantasy points to the fourth most fantasy points to wide receivers. So it could be a Drake London game. And they give up the 8th most receptions to tight ends. There is opportunity for something to occur in the passing game for Atlanta. We just got to hope that Desmond Ridder doesn't go on an inaccuracy spree.
I am taking the Buccaneers.
I'm taking the Falcons.
Next up, we have the Detroit Lions 9-3 at the 4-8 Chicago Bears. Dennis, we've generally said home golf is better than road golf. We saw home golf have a couple of problems there in late November, but he had a huge game against the Bears, partly because they had to come back the first time they played. How do you feel about golf in this one?
So let me see. I'm looking up to see what the weather's going to be like in Chicago on Sunday. Looks like 35 and cloudy. Oh, no, wait, that's 1 a.m. not.
If they play at 1 a.m., I'm not bullish about anyone.
No. So it looks like 40, high 30s, low 40s, and sunny. So it should be a decent enough day, but on the road outside with golf makes me a little nervous. The Bears do give up the 3rd most passing touchdowns, but they also get the 3rd most interceptions. And so this literally feels like a 3 touchdown, 3 interception game for Goff. I could see him putting up, 220 yards with, 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, or 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. If the weather holds out, I'll be a little more optimistic. The other side of it is we have a David Montgomery revenge game, and Jahmyr Gibbs has shown he can run the ball as well. So they could, if the weather is bad or they want to shorten the game, Detroit does have the rushing game to make that happen.
For the Bears, you're probably starting DJ Moore, and you're definitely starting Justin Fields. Is there any other Bear that entices you in a crucial week?
I wish I could trust the running backs, but
good luck deciding which running back's going to get carries.
Honestly, it feels like Foreman's going to be the odd man out, and they may start to make a shift towards Roschon Johnson. But Herbert was the most explosive back early in the season when he was healthy, and he's back healthy. But it's hard for me to trust any of those 3 backs until we see them start to kind of lean in a specific direction with all 3 of them healthy. I don't mind a 2-back share, but when you have 3 backs, it just is such a pain for fantasy. If I had to start one of them, I'm probably going to start Roschon because I think he's going to get the passing down work. And I don't mind starting Cole Kmet. He's tight end 7 on the year, averaging 11.2 points. I know Fields has eyes for DJ Moore, but he doesn't mind throwing the ball to Cole Kmet either.
Yeah, I was going to say Kmet would be the other one that I would look at. You might have better options at tight end, but you certainly have worse options at tight end. I am taking the Lions.
I'm going to take my hometown team too.
Next up, 7-5 Indianapolis Colts at the 6-6 Cincinnati Bengals. Kind of an interesting one with a lot of playoff implications. Dennis, we've seen Gardner Minshew doing some Gardner Minshew things. How are you feeling about him in Superflex? And how are you feeling about Zach Moss? We didn't quite get the boom we were looking for last week. No Jonathan Taylor, though. He's definitely the guy.
So Minshew is like the smoke and mirrors guy because we love he's got jorts and the mullet and the mustache and all that backstory going on. But he's quarterback 18 since he took over. If you've got him in Superflex, yeah, you're probably starting him. But it isn't like he's lighting up the world. Last week was his first QB1 week, and that was QB12. Like, he was barely a QB1. Since week 7, actually. He's typically only able to support one wide receiver, and that receiver is Michael Pittman. We did see last week on his QB1 week, Alec Pierce showed some signs of life, and Kylan Granson caught a couple passes for some good yardage.
This week they'll be gone.
Yeah, it's a Mo Alley Cox week, or I don't remember who else they got it. Will Mallory.
I was more thinking of this. They'll go back. I think it's either I've seen it a couple times. It's Granson and some other ancillary, or it's Downs, and that's what makes all of them a little bit tougher to bet on.
They're a roll of the dice. As far as Moss goes, he was chalk last week, and everybody and I get it. He put up 165 yards versus the Titans earlier this year, and so you're thinking, well, he knows what to do. But he crapped the bed. He was RB27 last week against the Titans, so it's hard to get super excited about him. The Bengals give up the 11th most rushing yards, and so the opportunity is going to be there. I mean, Trey Sermon isn't a threat to Zach Moss's touches.
You sure?
So if you have Moss, I think you're starting him expecting RB2 numbers, hoping for some RB1 numbers.
Next up for the Bengals, Jake Browning had a hell of a game on Monday Night Football. How are you feeling about him in Superflex? He's got a good complement of weapons.
I mean, the Colts are middle of the pack versus quarterbacks, but they get the 5th most interceptions. So, and we've seen, who is it? Kenny Moore returned some for pick sixes. I'm not sure that I'd get too excited about a journeyman quarterback, but he looked good. If you're starting him, you're just trying to get through week 14. I don't know that I'm expecting that kind of performance week to week for a 27-year-old journeyman quarterback who literally has started one game in his career now, 2.
Yeah. I thought he was an undrafted rookie.
This year?
Yeah.
No, I think not Browning.
Oh, I must have gotten him confused with somebody else. I was thinking he was having you're right, he's 27. No, so it's last year that they took him. He got drafted in 22. He must have just been an older, or he must have been some, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think he
was. He went undrafted. He was an undrafted free agent in 2019 with Minnesota.
Right.
Well, that makes me a little less excited about his story, but you know what? I'm taking the Bengals.
I'm going to take the Bengals just because I don't think the Colts are that good.
I choose violence. If we can have all these teams end up with the same record, they're going to have to claw each other's eyes out plus it'll be better for the fantasy playoffs if everybody has something to play for. Right now, nobody's really running away with anything, which is great. Next up, the 8-4 Jacksonville Jaguars at the 7-5 Cleveland Browns. Dennis, Trevor Lawrence, a limited practice, officially questionable. I am still dubious after that injury that he could play. How would you feel about the Jaguars if they're missing Lawrence?
Ridley hasn't been great this year without Zay Jones. Now, I will say Beathard came in and was getting the ball to Evan Ingram. It certainly looks like it'll be a big Evan Ingram game if Beathard is in there. But with Ridley and Zay Jones and Parker Washington, I'm a little more concerned. Just in part because the Jags offensive line hasn't been great. ETN's banged up as well. D'Ernest Johnson has started to cut into his snaps. And, as nice as it is with D'Ernest Johnson's story, I mean, he was a 4'6", 4'6'5" running back, undersized running back coming out of Florida Atlantic or Florida International. One of those schools. It isn't, we're not expecting him to be the next Jamal Charles. So I think it's going to be a challenging game. The defense is going to have to play above their head, even against Jake Browning.
Against it
Or
would be CJ Beathard.
Yeah, Beathard.
If you can't go, yeah. Even I was confused about which game.
Whoever.
For the Browns, they have yet to name a starting quarterback that I've seen, which is always a great sign. But how are we feeling about Amari Cooper and David Njoku? Cooper now only wide receiver 31 on the season. Has been banged up a little bit. Njoku has dropped a little bit, dropped the passes a little bit. So how are you feeling about those guys?
So did Cooper practice today? Because he hadn't practiced as of yesterday.
Yes, I believe he's listed as questionable, so it doesn't say whether he practiced. Concussion, ribs, questionable.
Yeah, it's I feel like it might be he might be out this week. Maybe he plays, but we've also seen Cooper not be super effective when he's banged up, so that would make me nervous. I know that Flacco has some connection with Elijah Moore going back to their New York days. The Jags give up the 9th most yards to tight ends, but this monkey wrench Hunter Bryant threw in the tight end situation last week.
I know.
I mean, I feel like it's Njoku, but now you've got to be concerned that Bryant is a tight end killer.
So I honestly, the only Brown I feel confident in, weirdly, is Jerome Ford. And that being said, I am actually taking the Browns.
I'm going to take the Browns as well.
Next up, a tough matchup: the Carolina Panthers 1-11 at the 5-7 New Orleans Saints. Is there any Panther you feel good about playing in such a crucial week?
Well, a couple that I have to play. I'm playing Jonathan Mingo in a couple spots. He's averaging 7 targets a game over the last 4 games. Seems like they're trying to get him involved. He had 10 targets last week. So last week he was wide receiver 26. That's his best week on the season. He's a rookie. We're going into week 14. It feels like he's getting to the point where, maybe now he's got something going. He isn't worried. He's past the point of, I'm worried about DJ Chark, or I'm worried about Terrace Marshall, or I'm worried about Adam Thielen. The team kind of seems to be moving on. The Saints give up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, so that's going to be a challenge for the rookie and for Bryce Young. But Chuba Hubbard's coming off consecutive RB1 weeks, and last week was his first 100-yard game. And the Saints can be had against the run. So it feels like if I have to pick, let's say if I'm picking a flex option and my choices are Mingo and Hubbard, I'm going to go Hubbard.
Yeah, the Hubbard's game last week was encouraging. See if he can do it again. For the Saints, Derek Carr is tracking toward playing. You're playing Kamara and Chris Olave, who is expected to play. Taysom Hill, Rashid Shaheed, and Juwan Johnson are all questionable, but none of them practiced this week. So are there any other Saints you are feeling good about?
Did you say Taysom Hill was questionable?
Yes, foot hand did not practice all week.
Dang.
I know. And he's the one
tight end one. I mean,
he's a setter. Forget it, tight end for me. I think he was my start at tight end in my start column. I'm going to cry.
So I can't sit Olave. I mean,
yeah, and he's expected to play. I think Olave and Kamara you're definitely playing.
Yeah, he's probably a wide receiver too. I hope we can see some more out of A.T. Perry, but I'm not terribly optimistic if Carr's back at quarterback.
I am taking the Saints nonetheless.
You got to pick somebody, right? I'm taking the Saints too.
Well, and if the Buccaneers and the Saints win, you'll be back to a 3-way tie for that division, which will be a cracker. Houston Texans 7-5 at the 4-8 New York Jets. You're playing CJ Stroud. You're probably playing Nico Collins. Any other Texans you're feeling good about?
I'm not sure I feel good about Collins going against DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner.
Somebody's got to catch the ball.
It's going to be.
He had 191 yards and a touchdown. He was going against Surtain half the time last week. So,
well, what's that say about Surtain then?
Don't you dare.
So I mean, if you have Collins, you're starting him. You've got to be pretty stacked at wide receiver to not start Collins. But I'm tempering my expectations certainly, and even for Stroud, I'm probably, I'm not looking for a 350-yard 4-touchdown kind of day. But the Jets can be had versus tight ends. They give up the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends.
If only those guys had a tight end.
But it's mostly by virtue of touchdowns because they give up the 2nd most touchdowns to tight ends. So whether it's Dalton Schultz or Brevin Jordan
rolled out,
he just got ruled out.
Yep.
All right. So
kills my team. I threw him in there as my Hail Mary. Now I have to go find a new Hail
Mary. Well, you could do worse than Brevin Jordan because
probably gonna play K-Dot.
The CJ Stroud looked at Jordan. I think he had 6 targets last week. So I don't know that I'm rushing to get Jordan in my but if I had, so let me put it this way. If my choices are Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce and Brevin Jordan, it's really hard to not start Brevin Jordan.
It's true. The Jets going back to Zach Wilson supposedly for the rest of the season. What does that mean for you and the Jets in fantasy?
I think it's good for Garrett Wilson because he understands that mission. And I guess to be fair, Zach Wilson has been their best quarterback this year. I mean, I don't know what that's saying really, but he was QB 26 in weeks 1 through 10, and he was able to support Garrett Wilson at wide receiver 16 level. And so as a Garrett Wilson manager, I'm good with that. Get Zach Wilson in. He's going to make Garrett Wilson successful as Zach Wilson can. And it might be, Breece Hall's banged up too. So now it could be a Dalvin Cook game.
Lord, I am taking the Texans.
I am too.
Next up, the Los Angeles Rams 6-6 at the 9-3 Baltimore Ravens. Dennis, how are you feeling about Cooper Kupp these days?
Yeah, seems like he's fading fast. Even when he's healthy, Puka is getting significant market share and providing a substantial amount of explosiveness and run after the catch that Kupp used to do, but he just doesn't seem to have it this year. So that injury, well, he may be back, but he may not be air quotes back. And I'm nervous about. I don't have issues sitting Kupp this week.
Yeah, no Tyler Higbee for the Rams this week either. For the Ravens, you're starting Zay Flowers.
Ben Skoranek.
You're starting Zay Flowers, but how are we feeling about Isaiah Likely, who's the kind of Mark Ingram replacement, and OBJ?
Likely has been a little bit up and down. Like last year when Andrews got hurt, Likely had that like one big game where everybody's like, oh, he's just a plug and play guy. But as it turns out, he's not necessarily a plug and play guy. Now he did good. What was it, last week or the week before? 4 catches, 40 yards. He looked athletic. He just didn't get enough volume. OBJ, if he's healthy, Lamar targets him. And if OBJ is at full strength, I don't know that I would start him over Flowers, but I'm comfortable starting him in the flex. You understand with OBJ at this point that he could literally catch one pass and be done for the game. And next week too. He could run a ton of cardio and just not convert the targets he's getting. That's the hand you're dealt when you're rostering OBJ right now.
I am taking the Ravens in this one.
So am I.
6-6 Minnesota Vikings at the 5-7 Las Vegas Raiders. Dennis Jefferson is coming back. What are you expecting in his return?
11 targets, 9 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown on the low side.
I mean, that That'd be pretty good for.
So, I mean, his quarterback is a rocket scientist, and he's the best wide receiver in the game. I suspect Josh Dobbs is going to target him like a madman. 11 targets may literally be like
that might be the first quarter. Well, and the Raiders don't have an exceptional secondary. So
no.
Speaking of receivers, Josh Jacobs has been doing pretty well since they had the coaching change. But how are you feeling, with Aiden O'Connell back there with Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, and Michael Mayer?
Mayer is starting to come on at the tight end position. He's far enough down the pecking order there that he doesn't really get enough volume to be a tight end 1. But he's tight end 18 on the year. And for a rookie, I guess we'll take that. Austin Hooper, who was their quote unquote starter, I think he's like tight end 54 or something, way down there. Adams is wide receiver 12. Myers is wide receiver 25. I think you're good starting both of those guys. Typically, we're playing in 3 wide receiver, 2 flex leagues, and both Myers and Adams are starters in that.
I'm taking the Raiders.
I'm going Vikings.
Next up, we have the 6-6 Seattle Seahawks at the 9-3 San Francisco 49ers. Dennis, both Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker are banged up, but both are expected to play. How do you feel that's going to play out for fantasy?
Oh, it's going to be a Pete Carroll nightmare.
It's going to be a fantasy player's nightmare because they're also playing a tough defense.
I think both of those guys provide a little bit of play when hurt kind of approach to the game. I don't know how productive they'll be, and you probably, if you can avoid starting them this week, I would, because if they're banged up, that means DJ Dallas will get some run. They'll probably go with more 3 wide receiver sets and 2 tight ends. We'll see Noah Fant and Will Dissly active, JSN, Tyler Lockett, and DK coming off his monster game. So it could be a pass-heavy game, in part because they're going to be playing against the 49ers, and they're probably going to have to score some points, because I don't know that the Seahawks defense, if Philadelphia's defense got 45 put up on them, I don't think it'll be quite the thing if Pete Carroll and the Seahawks can hold them down.
For the 49ers, is Brock Purdy entering QB1 territory at this stage?
He may be entering the QB1 conversations. He's QB7. He's on a team that's loaded with weapons, and he has some mobility. He's putting up about 10 to 12 yards per game on the ground. If he could get that up to 20 yards, that would get him over 300 yards a year rushing, and probably 3 to 4 touchdowns on the ground. That would give him a boost. And with the passing weapons that they have there, it's not uncommon for him to put up 2 to 3 touchdowns a game and 250 to 350 yards a game. He's going to score fantasy points, and he doesn't turn the ball over a lot. So I think that we need to kind of put him in the, Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow type of conversation, because, both of those guys are not runners and so on. But Purdy ran a 4.56 coming out.
I am taking the 49ers by a lot.
Yeah, I'm taking the Niners as well.
Next up, 6-6 Buffalo Bills at the 8-4 Kansas City Chiefs. Dennis, you're starting Josh Allen. You're starting Stephon Diggs. Dawson Knox questionable, may come off IR for this one. Is there any other Bill besides Diggs and Allen that you feel good about?
I think even if Knox comes off, I think you still start Dalton Kincaid. He's tight end 7 since Knox went down. He's been super productive. Knox has practiced full all week, but he hasn't been activated yet. I suspect they'll activate him because he's substantially better than Quentin Morris, and so you're going to want to get your best guys back. But I don't expect Knox to come in and start to impact Dalton Kincaid's targets. might actually free Kincaid up a little more.
For the Chiefs, Isaiah Pacheco has been ruled out. How are you feeling about that backfield with no Pacheco?
So they were already the 11th lowest run rate team in the league. McKinnon looks like he's coming back this week. CEH will probably get the start and be the ground guy. I expect 9 carries for CEH and about 6 carries for Jerick McKinnon, and Patrick Mahomes to throw it 55 times.
Yeah, they may need to because Buffalo can put up some points. I am taking the Bills.
So am I.
Next up, 6-6 Denver Broncos at the 5-7 Los Angeles Chargers. Dennis, it's not been a real.
Hold on. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going Kansas City at home against the 6-6 Bills team. I can't pick the Bills.
Buffalo. The Broncos haven't had the most robust passing game, but Cortland Sutton's been pretty good. How are you feeling about him in this crucial week?
So he's wide receiver 21 on the year. Now, I've been a big Cortland Sutton fan. And I think wide receiver 21 is in line with what our expectations should be. Now, I am as guilty as anybody of putting higher expectations on Mr. Sutton. I apologize. He's probably a low-end wide receiver 2. That's what we should have been valuing him as, is a low 2, a high 3, and he's producing there. He'll have some high-end wide receiver 2 weeks, maybe even the occasional wide receiver 1 week, but he gets targets, he converts them, he gets downfield, he gets end zone targets, scores touchdowns. He does, is he an elite receiver? No, but he's a very good receiver. And if Russell can get him the ball, I think Sutton will produce for you. He's the kind of guy that if he's your RB or your wide receiver 3 in your fantasy lineup, or maybe he's your 3/4, some weeks you're flexing him, some weeks you have him doing your wide receiver 3 because of buys, I think you're really pleased with that outcome.
Meanwhile, how are you feeling about Austin Eckler? He's been on the struggle bus a little lately, and his coach not so subtly implied that they were going to start giving carries to other backs this week.
Well, are those other backs Isaiah Spiller, Larry Roundtree, or just Joshua Kelly? Because we've seen how that's went. Eckler kind of looks like dust, but he is RB13, since returning in week 8. But he's been RB 34 over the last 3 weeks. I saw somebody say it 3 weeks ago. It's like he looks like a fullback out there. It's just, it's not been great. He's getting his fewest targets and receptions since 2018. He's 29th in explosive run rate with just 3.2% for all backs with a minimum of 75 carries. He just the things that separated him as a 199-pound running back aren't happening this year. He's not putting up explosive plays, and he's not getting 8 or 10 targets a game. And so, he's not great for fantasy.
I am taking the Denver Broncos in this one.
I'm going to take the Broncos too, so we can get a new head coach in Los Angeles.
Probably get a new running back.
Do you think they go? You think they go offense or defensive head coach
for the Chargers?
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea.
Well, Staley was a defensive guy. Usually teams like to go back and forth, but if they're going to keep Kellen Moore.
Yeah, I don't know. Good Lord. Sunday Night Football might be one of the better games of the week. The 10-2 Philadelphia Eagles at the 9-3 Dallas Cowboys. Dennis, DeAndre Swift has cooled a little bit in the last couple of weeks, and we saw Kenny Gainwell get some more action last week. How are you feeling about that split going into this crucial week?
I'm not terribly concerned about Gainwell getting additional carries in a 45-10 blowout or something like that.
And he got a lot of targets too, but
yeah.
It was 42-19.
42-19. Okay. So we're splitting hairs here. I'm not terribly concerned. Swift has a 60-40 edge in total snaps on the season. And we know from 4 years and 3 years in Detroit that you're not going to give DeAndre Swift a 70% snap share, 80% snap share. He's 5'9" and 208 pounds. Good BMI, but not a terribly big guy. He has a 65 to 35% edge on running plays. So they are running more with DeAndre Swift. But Swift also has a 56 to 44% edge on passing downs. So he's getting the majority of the work. And it would probably, one game isn't going to swing things at this point in the season, really swing things drastically. But it was a blowout. DeAndre Swift has an injury history. He gets banged up. There was no reason to continue to play him a lot of snaps. Yeah, you want to keep him fresh. You want to make sure he stays sharp, but you don't need to put him out there.
They even put in Mariota for a while at the end of that game. So. Meanwhile, for Dallas, Dak has been hot, and so has Lamb. You're probably playing Ferguson and Pollard. Anyone else interest you? Are you taking a shot on Brandon Cooks?
I've started Brandon Cooks, started Michael Gallup, but they're teams that are rebuilding, and I'm perfectly fine if they don't score many points. Either one of those, they're lottery tickets. You have an empty spot in your lineup because of injuries, because of bye weeks or something, and you just need to put a body in there and hope you get more than 0. Cooks, I think, is a little bit better off than Gallup, but Gallup is I hope I don't get 0, and Cooks is more of I hope I don't get 4 or 5. Maybe I can get 7.
I'm taking Dallas in this one.
So am I.
Next up, we have 2 games on Monday night, and you were right. They both kick off at the same time. The first one is Tennessee and Miami, which is playing on ESPN. The Titans are 4-8. The Dolphins 9-3 come into the week as the number 1 seed in the AFC. The big fantasy play for the Titans is Derrick Henry. The big problem playing against the Dolphins has been the teams get behind and they can't run so much. So can Derrick Henry get enough volume for you this week?
The game script would say no, but if they can, so if Miami scores and then Tennessee can run the ball with Henry and they can score, and they can, if when they have their drives, they can get points and they can make some stops on Miami, it's possible that Henry gets the volume. I don't think it's likely. The Dolphins should get out to an early lead, and Tennessee will have to throw to catch up. That can be ugly with Will Levis. The Titans have the 4th worst passing offense in the NFL, and they're going up against a team that hung 70 on the Broncos. And I don't know that Tennessee is as good as the Broncos.
I mean, they might be as good as the Broncos were in week 3, but for the Dolphins, Raheem Mostert, a little bit of a knee injury is questionable, but is expected to play. Do you like Devon Achane? Do you like Raheem Mostert? You playing both?
So I do think you play both of them. Fantasy Pros has Achane ranked as RB6 this week and Mostert as RB17. So that's an RB1 and 2. And would it surprise anybody if they flipped and Mostert finished as the RB1 and Achane as the RB2? Probably not. I think Mostert was the starter, but Achane had the edge in snaps and touches last week, 61 to 38 for snaps, 61% to 38%, and 17 to 12 in touches. Achane got in the end zone twice, Mostert once. To me, I think it's going to be a hot hand thing. If Mostert's in there and he's gaining yardage, they're not just going to sub him out. Achane is the more explosive back on the Miami team. But I feel like if you roster both of them, you're starting both of them.
Yeah, I am taking the Dolphins.
So am I.
The other Monday night game is the 6-6 Green Bay Packers at the 4-8 New York Giants. And this is the one that they decided to put on ABC and ESPN Plus. Dennis, for the Green Bay Packers, they have a lot to play for suddenly, but they also have a lot of questions. Jaden Reed is questionable with a chest injury. A.J. Dillon is questionable with a groin injury. Aaron Jones is questionable with his knee injury. Those guys were very limited participants on Friday. Christian Watson is questionable with a hamstring injury, has yet to practice. Official final injury designations for Monday night games aren't usually till Saturday. But how are you feeling about hedging your bets on some of these Packers skill position players for Monday night?
I'm a little bit nervous. They've looked good, but then all of a sudden everybody's banged up. Luke Musgrave's on IR, Christian Watson. So I was like moving to the I'm out on Christian Watson camp. I was going, and then he come back and he was looking great. Looked so much better running routes than he did last year. Like it looked like he had worked to improve as a wide receiver, not just be a big fast guy out there that was just going to try to outrun people and not worry about running a good route. And then he popped that hamstring again last week, and it's just dang. You know, Jaden Reed has come on and he's playing really well. Romeo Doubs is consistent. Dontavian Wicks, like if Reed misses the game and Watson is out as well, Dontavian Wicks has been balling. I'm like Christian Watson not staying healthy may make Dontavian Wicks the actual starter there, and Watson be just this flash guy. Because that seems to be, you know, once he does that once or twice, he gets injured. You know, Reed and Doubs, they're back to back. Like when I first was looking, my first thought was like, and I started typing, I'm like, oh, well, Reed is probably your ceiling guy. You know, he's more explosive. He does this. Doubs is a little more floor. And I go look, and they're literally wide receiver 35 and wide receiver 36. They're scoring the same exact amount of points, 11.5 points per game. Their total points, they're separated by 1/10 of a point in total points. So there went that argument. It's just that was what the perception was. I think if it's the two of them out there this week, I think they're both good to go. Jordan Love is comfortable with them. This young team is growing together. It'll be interesting next year because they're going to rework their running back core. I don't expect Dillon or Jones to be back with the team. If they're both out this week, you know, Patrick Taylor is going to be the guy I would expect. They got a guy, Emmanuel Wilson, that they've had active a couple times too. You know, both of those guys are bigger backs, I think. Not as big as Dillon, but bigger than Jones. So I don't know that either one of them necessarily have a ton of wiggle, but they could be just good enough to give the offense some balance.
Emmanuel Wilson's on IR. So it probably won't be him.
No,
I was like, wait, I thought that name was familiar. I don't really want to play any of those. I don't know if I trust any of the Green Bay backs either. I would guess either one or both of Jones and Dillon will play, but they just haven't put up enough for me. For the Giants, Tyrod Taylor, full participant, still on IR. Not sure if they'll bring him off. Currently still tracking, I think, for Tommy DeVito to start. How are you feeling about this Giants offense with him coming off a bye? He looked a little better going into that bye week.
Yeah, he's getting better each game. He's developed some connections with the receivers and Hyatt, Slayton. They may even have Darren Waller back this week. That could be a thing, though Bellinger is a decent enough tight end. The Packers are bottom third in the league, bottom 10 in the league in some categories versus running backs. So in fantasy points to running backs, yards, touchdowns, touchdowns and rushing yards, they're bottom 10 in the league, giving up the less than, see, what is it, 8th most rushing yards. So it could be a Saquon Barkley game. And if Barkley's putting up yards and eating up the clock, keeping the Packers off the field, DeVito is, kind of one of those just good enough to be dangerous kind of quarterbacks. He can run a little bit. He doesn't have anything to lose. He's out there basically playing to get an opportunity to be a career backup, and he's frankly kind of starting to earn it. It wouldn't surprise me if the Giants upset the Packers in New Jersey, but I'm going to go Packers.
I'm taking the Packers too. It looks like Waller ran a few routes this week, but he's not showing up on their practice reports. I don't think they're close to activating him. But I am taking the Packers as well. You look at the two Monday night games. I don't think either of them is spectacular, but it's curious to me that by putting it on ABC, they must think the Packers-Giants game is going to be better. So we'll have to see. I'm personally might be watching the Manning cast because they're going to try to cover both games at the same time, and they're pretty hilarious. That'll do it for this week. If people are trying to fill a long and lonely Saturday, especially now that college football has pretty much wrapped up its regular season, what can the people do?
They need to head on over to their favorite podcast platform. Hit that search button, go find the Fantasy Football Roundtable, and hit that subscribe. We'll download right into your podcast player. You can hear us at your leisure. We've been working on the off-season calendar, getting ready. We'll kind of start off talking NFL playoffs, and then we're going to look at like how bad we were at some stuff and maybe some good stuff. We aren't terrible at everything. Go into rookie content, lots of dynasty stuff. Be lots of fun. Come along for the ride.
Well, that'll do it for today. We will be back on Tuesday with a wrap on all of the Week 14 action. If you are on the bubble trying to make the playoffs, best of luck out there this week.